Buongiorno. So, as I promised yesterday, today I would like to talk about more empirical stuff and researches, and how was the interplay between gender and ethnicity, and basically, after more than a decade of preoccupation dealing with Roma integration, and later the terminology has been changed into Roma inclusion, and the Roma issue was perceived as a gender-neutral minority and social inclusion policy. I'm using this term as a Roma inclusion because that's what you can find in many European Union documents, as well as social inclusion refer to the majority as well, and also the minority, that they have to interact, and there is a both side. One side who would like to integrate, the other one who is willing to accept the minority. So it's not always okay, slow down. It's not always depend on one group, it's always depend from both groups, the majority and the minority as well. So as I told you already, that if we look around what kind of researches has been conducted within the last 10, 20 years, there were really lack of gender and ethnic disaggregated data. So what does it mean? That we had researches and they focusing either on gender, either on or ethnicity, but the two things are not an exclusionary categories, and there are very few researchers who were able to integrate these two social factors. And in fact, the UNDP is one of the international organizations which were always conducted ethnic and gender disaggregated data. For instance, I'm referring to that in 2005, they had a report which called on Faces of Poverty, Faces of Hope, Vulnerability, Profiles for Decade of Roma Inclusion Countries. It was carried out in 2005, and they were using gender and ethnic disaggregated data. So what is this decade of Roma inclusion? I think it was already mentioned in a few words yesterday, that I think Adria mentioned the Decade of Roma Inclusion, which was initiated by the Open Society Institute and the World Bank in 2003. That was the time when they launched, but the decade, actually, we're almost finishing the Roma decade, and we're supposed to fill the gap between Roma and non-Roma. And you will see that what I find in the UNDP research, in fact, the gap between the Roma and the non-Roma is still really huge. So the decade is a very unique international initiatives, as I already told, and it was put forward the most important non-governmental and intergovernmental organizations. And also, I wanted to talk about a little bit like how Romani women has been conceptualized, or how Romani women issues has been described in international documents. Most of the time, most of the documents and articles describe and conceptualize Romani women's struggle as a double or multiple forms of discrimination. Double meaning that they are discriminated by ethnicity and by gender as well. But that's a kind of problematic from an intersectional point of view, because ethnicity and gender, as I already pointed out yesterday, it's really interacting and intersecting, and it's not a two parallel social forces. The intersectional conceptualization certainly refers particularly to Romani women's social and political position, and indicates both Roma internal patriarchal oppression and the external oppression, social economic exclusion, experienced from the non-Roma societal structure. You remember in theories as well, so we distinguished as inter and intra. So inter to exposing the internal factors, the internal hierarchies, and the intra when they are interacting with the larger social structures. And also I think I was talk a little bit about the Mike Ferlo, who distinguished this intersectional and multiple discrimination, and basically she's saying that multiple discrimination assume equivalence among various social categories and ignore the differentiated nature and dynamics of inequality. This very much will come back in an empirical finding, because sometimes ethnicity is going to be much more stronger than gender forces, or gender is much more stronger than ethnicity, but you will see it. For example, reporting higher unemployment rates for women, we can find it in several national researches, like we don't know who are these women, what kind of background do they have, but we know that in average, the women unemployment rate is higher than men. However, they ignore the fact that the unemployment rate for Romani men is still higher than non-Romani women. You see that there is a difference which is not really revealed and explained by this kind of big national researches. And so what the statistical data shows, and what we were using, the UNDP data sets from 2004 and 2011, and the data outlined the intersecting structural inequalities that Romani women face. So we were not able to see what's going on at the micro level, at the local level. What we were able to see, look at the statistics and what the statistics says about structural issues. And certainly gender issues is one of the components which needs to be taken into any kind of Roma social inclusion policies as well. So why focusing women? I think this was one of the interesting questions yesterday as well, and I tried to answer it in the light of the our finding, and also I'm sure that many of you familiar with that there is a really strong argument that investing women goes beyond personal gains and makes an intergenerational impact on their children as well as on their wider communities. So it's not just coming from the Roma issue, but in many researches shows that in fact, children's education is much more depends upon or influenced by their mother education than their father. I'm sorry, but there's a reality which is understandable. And in this framework, basically investing in Romani women, what the international organization presume, they think that it will have a long-lasting effect and impact on the Roma community through the intergenerational transmissions, and consequently will make the efforts in regards to Roma inclusion more effective for the benefits of the present as well as the future generation. So really there is a hope that women is the one who is nurturing children, women is the one who's carrying lots of duties, internal duties in the community as well. And if we investing in women, it for sure that it will have an impact on various generations as well. So the data what we were using from 2011, actually it was implemented by the UNDP, World Bank, and the European Commission agency, the Agency for Fundamental Rights, and in various countries in Southeastern Europe, and approximately they took 750 Roma households. So I think it's very important to emphasize this was a household survey. So it's not a personal survey, but it was a household survey, and approximately 350 non-Roma households living in proximity were interviewed, the Roma as well. So what does it mean? So basically what they did, they tried to compare basically they were targeting Roma settlements, the most marginalized, and also they tried to compare the Roma situation with non-Roma who are living in a close proximity to Roma. So that means that socially they were quite close to the Roma groups. In fact, I think the reality is even harsher, because in the reality, if you compare Roma who are living in an isolated settlement with non-Roma who are middle class, urban, household, the difference is going to be much, much higher than here. And so information about household members was provided by the head of the household or the person that proved to be the most knowledgeable. It could be men and women as well. When there were questions about early childhood education, they were answered by the primary caretaker of the children. Individual status questions and attitudes were answered by respondents over 50 years of age, randomly selected through the first birthday technique. So if you're gonna look at, I think you can find it on the internet as well, the questionnaires is quite detailed and quite rich. There's a question about education, employment, early education, health issues, attitudes toward Roma, towards non-Roma, values and belief system, and also civic. There are few questions about civic and political participation as well, which were analyzed in another paper. But now, since we are talking about education, I just really would like to focus on the educational results. So over the last decades, we know that there has been a consensus among experts, researchers, policymakers, and activists as well, that equal access to quality education for boys and girls increases the level of education as well as employment opportunities for the Roma. And I think one of the most tangible thing, if you look back, what happened in the last 10 or 15 years, really the education level is become a little bit higher amongst the Roma. It's due to the general educational attainment of the majority population, but as well as due to the various scholarship and fellowships which were provided by government and by non-governmental actors as well in various countries. And so the most access to quality education, it was very much ensured. Even the most recent and most relevant document, which was published by the European Commission, that's the EU framework for national Roma integration strategies through 2020. This document clearly states that all EU member states should act to ensure that all Roma children have access to quality education and are not subject to discrimination or segregation, regardless of whether they are sedentary or not. Member states should ensure as a minimum that all Roma children complete at least primary school. So the EU Roma strategy framework, at least they are targeting the primary school. So at least all the Roma should finish the primary school, and they are banning the discrimination, the educational discrimination and segregation. We talked a lot about the various forms of discrimination and segregation. I'm not going to go into that. So educational indicators, so what kind of indicators were used by us? So we know that education can be measured in several dimensions, as both the educational attainment itself and its quality are important factors determining intellectual and personal development and employment prospects. You remember that yesterday it came back many times that, okay, so we can have various schools, but it's very much depends from the quality of the education. So what kind of education are you getting there? And what kind of infrastructure do you have? And what kind of prospect is going to be ensured by your education? And The 2011 UNDP regional survey on Roma communities provides several measures of education and its quality. However, we limit the discussion to a few most representative educational indicators, which are total number of years spent in school, the highest level of education obtained, the dropout rate, and overall computer literacy rate. I mean, we know that these factors are really important if they want to compete in a 21st century's educational system. It's very important that how many years you spent in the school, what is your highest educational level, the dropout rate, as well as the digital knowledge, as we know that it's very important. So look at the data. I hope that it won't be too boring for you. So basically, the first is about the years in education by ethnicity, gender. So we check the average and the median number of years spent in education by ethnicity and gender. So what you can see in the first table, that men across working age, mean across working age, 64, and Roma male, Roma female, the Roma male 6.71, Roma female 5.66, non-Roma male 10.95, non-Roma female 10.7. In fact, we check the median as well, because the median is much more clear. Look at that, Roma male 8%, Roma female 7%. So there is a 1% difference, which is quite significant statistically here in this case. However, between non-Roma male and non-Roma female, you can see that there is no gap. So the gap is really diminished within the last decade. And also, think about it, what I told, that basically this UNDP survey were targeting the most marginalized community, and they took the non-Roma who are living in a proximity to Romani settlements. So the difference is not so high. So if we would see the average, national average, then the gap even it would be much higher. So the second one, the years in education by age group, average number of years spent in education by gender, ethnicity in each age group. So you see that we made an age group, and also Roma male, non-Roma male, Roma female, non-Roma female. So the blue lines, the Roma male and females, as you see that it's increasing as they are getting older and older. So that means that in the young population, the educational gap is much smaller. It's really started to diminish in the last decades. But those who are old, you can see the big difference. So it's a quite kind of, optimistic picture, because there is a progression, and hopefully it's going to be even better. Compare with non-Roma who living in proximity to the Roma settlement, you see that they were able to close the gap, and in fact the gap between male and female, even above 35, is much less than between Roma and non-Roma. So it's a quite visible. And certainly you can see the differences between the blue lines and the red lines as well. So it's still huge. And also non-Roma females' education is still much better than Roma male. So ethnicity, it's really a prevailing factor in this. So the second one, actually, we use some international standards. The level of education is classified according to International Standard Classification of Education. That's the ISCED. But you will be able to read the whole text within few months, because it will be published in August or in September. So Roma male, Roma female, non-Roma male, non-Roma female. I think something which is very, very visible and tangible here, that the no education, if you see that the darkest blue, the highest is amongst Roma female. So that's what the statistics says at the structural level. And amongst non-Roma male and non-Roma female, it's really decreased. So there is a tiny sign. And also, if you're gonna go above, there is a gray line and white line that what you can't find on the Roma male and Roma female column, because basically that's the higher education, like the college and university diploma, what they do not have. The next one, the dropout rates by ethnicity and gender, individuals 9 to 17 years old, and Roma male and Roma female. It's still Roma female dropout rate a little bit, 2%, but still significant, statistically higher. However, if you compare with non-Roma male and non-Roma female, in fact, I think it's quite interesting that even amongst non-Roma, that the female dropout rate is a little bit higher, 1%. And if you compare Roma with non-Roma, so 30% respectively compared with to 9%, or 33% compared with 10%, it's still quite high. And I'm emphasizing again that this is the non-Roma population which living in close proximity to Roma. So not the one who are living in a very poshy area, but those who are living in a close proximity to them. So dropout rates by ethnicity, gender, and country. You see Hungary, Roma male 6%, female 8%, non-Roma 2%, female 0%. Czech Republic, male 15%, female 10%, non-Roma 6%, male 3%, female. Something which is interesting, like look at the Serbian case, where Roma... Oh, okay. Okay. Okay, so I'm not going to read the whole thing, but one of the interesting things, for example, in the case of Serbia, where Roma male dropout rate is much higher than the female, and interestingly, in Serbia, the non-Roma male dropout rate also higher than the non-Roma female. So generally, as you see that the female dropout rate is higher generally, but there are some countries which are considered to be different from the others, because the male dropout rate is much higher. So certainly it has to be some kind of contextual issues which could be analyzed at the other level. So literacy rate by ethnicity and gender, individuals 9 to 25 years old, Roma male 88.15%, Roma female 86.04%, so it's a little bit less. And in the case of non-Roma, the non-Roma male 98.38%, and non-Roma female 97.79%. So again, you see that between Roma male and Roma female, still the gap is not that big, but still is bigger than between non-Roma male and non-Roma female. So the literacy rate concerning gender issues inside the Roma group is still an indicator. Share of individuals who perceive university or higher level of education as sufficient by age groups, ethnicity, and gender. So for a girl, in the case of non-Roma is much higher. And for a boy, the same, almost the same, as you see. In the case of Roma, a little bit different, not really. So it's a very similar actually, but something which is very interesting, the average appropriate age to stop education and start working by ethnicity and gender. So basically we asked that what do you think when you should stop your study? And in the case of Roma male and Roma female, and non-Roma male and non-Roma female, as you see that in the case of Roma, it's much lower. They really predict that they should stop the education around 18, and compare with non-Roma, particularly boy should stop above 20. So it's a significant difference. And also start working, there's a difference is what do they think about it, Roma and non-Roma, when they should start to working. And I think it's very important, the educational aspiration, as we were talking about yesterday as well, because I think it's very much depend from the educational system, the quality of the education, the teachers' attitudes towards the students, what do they expect from them, and what do they think about them. And so the ethnic gap regarding the educational aspiration of Roma may be explained by the condescending and prejudiced perceptions of the majority populations of them, and they internalize this negative explicit or implicit message that could limit their imaginations and even their educational aspiration. And I thought that it would be particularly important to talk about it in this context, because sometimes people think that, that's their culture, their tradition, that they don't want to study and that's enough for them. I'm just gonna tell you one of my experience, my latest experience, what happened 2 weeks ago. I was in Amsterdam. There was an international conference organized by the European Council on European crisis, and there was a panel on Roma issues, and there was a guy from Canada, David Sheffel, maybe some of you know him, and who wrote an anthropological study in Swinia. And basically he went to Swinia and he lived there in the community, and he conducted several interviews with women, because he was particularly focusing on the forced sterilization and forced marriages. And he had a problem with that, because his explication was that basically he did an interview with them and they love each other. They love each other. The love is something which is very important. It's coming from the informants. So the data is telling to him that they love each other, and that's why they're gonna get married earlier. What's the problem with that? Why these human rights NGOs are talking about forced marriage? Because they truly love each other, whatever. And also he was coming up that they have a television and they are socialized by the media, all this kind of sexual films and all kinds of sexual stuff which is influencing their life. Well, I think it's a kind of interesting thing, but also I believe that we have to challenge it, because certainly we cannot really just explain the early marriages based on love and based on TV socialization. We have to think about some bigger forces, bigger social, economic forces as well, and also the attitude towards the minority group. I'm a sociologist, and for many times I had some reservations concerning like traditional and cultural issues. I just always felt that it's so easy to explain everything and put it in the box that these are culture and tradition, and let them live happy in their community because they have their own culture. And I think it's a kind of dangerous thing, because it's basically, it's telling to us, like people who are in a better off situation, that we do not have to do anything with them. We do not have to touch them because they are having a great life, love, and nurturing their own tradition and culture. And I came across on the study, which was written by Ulysses Wilson, who is an American sociologist, and he mainly was dealing with underclass, black underclass, and in his latest work, he came up with an idea, what I inclined to, believe in, that culture as such it's a kind of mediating form. So what kind of culture is going to be nurtured by the certain community is not just depend from an internal value system, but it's very much depend upon what kind of big forces are influencing the communities, what kind of social, economical, political, or even attitude and prejudice towards that communities can be forcing and formulating factors as well. So going back to the education, what I'm saying that the educational aspiration of Roma children, it's very much depend from the outside world. So if you are hearing for many years that you are stupid and you should not study, or basically, even if it's not an explicit, just they feel that that's enough for you. I can tell you my own experience. I'm coming from a marginalized community, like my mother and my father. They couldn't write, couldn't read anything. They were totally illiterate. I was the first generation high school students in my extended family. And when I went to the high school, so I was the only Roma there, and I was a quite good student, and I think I had a quite okay life there. My classmates, they really liked me, my teachers as well. But my teachers, they never ever encouraged me, even though that I had a really good mark, to go to university and colleges, because they thought that like being a girl here in the high school and having such a family where there is no one were able to achieve even high school diploma, that's enough. So basically after the high school, I didn't apply to anywhere because I had no vision, no imagination, no any courage to apply to college and university. So I think it's very important, going back to the real life, to see the potential, to see the opportunity in that kid's life as well, who is even not, who is not coming from such an educated family as you are, or who is poorly dressed and whose language is not, upper middle class language, but still, I mean, he can be a talented in various others fields, and try to encourage them. And I think it's really working. And also, just another example, like my son, we went to the US in January without any English, without knowing any English. He was put in the classroom in a 5th grade with the others, and sometimes the teachers, they took out him and he's getting some extra English lessons, but he's with them in the 5th grade and he's doing the same test as the others, and like tiny little things, such as the teachers were asked 2 or 3 children to help him, guard him in the school, to show him the cafeteria and show him how the things are working, and he's okay. So I think, and of course they are telling to him, you are so great, you are so fantastic. And sometimes it's kind of strange for us as a European why they are telling so many times. But it's working, and it's really working. It has an effect on the children. So I would really encourage everybody just to see the potential in them. Thank you so much.